It's noon on the West Coast, 3 o'clock in Washington, where we're waiting to hear from the other intelligence chief whom President Trump reportedly pressured to publicly clear his name in the Russia investigation. The National Security Agency Director Mike Rogers set to testify in this hour. The Director of National Intelligence has already responded to the report. And the former CIA director told Congress he was concerned that the Russians may have recruited members of the Trump campaign to influence our presidential election. We're live on Capitol Hill. And it's 8 p.m. in Manchester, England, where our news teams are learning about more of the young victims and the bomber behind the UK's worst terror attack in more than a decade. ISIS has claimed responsibility. Questions: did it have involvement? Did it have influence? President Trump is calling the terrorists evil losers. Let's get to it.
Now, Shepard Smith reporting live from the Fox News deck.
Two very big stories today: the Russian investigation that swept up members of Team Trump and the investigation in England. Comprehensive coverage of both ahead. First, the suicide attack in Manchester. Officials now say at least 22 people are dead, some 60 others hurt, after a man set off a bomb at the end of an Ariana Grande concert. Officials in the UK identifying the suspected bomber now as 22-year-old Salman Abedi. British media report he was born in England to a Libyan family. Police say they also arrested another man in connection with that attack, though officials are not saying much about either person. One of the victims, 8-year-old Safi Rousseau, a teacher at her school, told the Guardian newspaper she was a beautiful girl in every aspect of the word. The Islamic State claiming responsibility for the blast, though U.S. intelligence officials say they have not yet verified that ISIS was either behind the attack or even that the terror group had influence upon it. We reported for hours last night on the chaos and confusion inside that arena after the blast.
Oh my God. What's going on? What just happened? What's going on? Oh my God!
What's going on, she said. It wasn't clear in the early going. More video showing people climbing over railings as they rush to get outside. Fans running downstairs, scrambling for exits. Witnesses describing scattered bolts and bits of metal. Hospital officials reporting people had shrapnel-like injuries. It is still not yet clear what type of device the bomber used. This next video is from inside a vehicle on the dash cam outside the arena. Watch to the lower left of your screen, then see the flash and hear the blast.
No.
Early reports from witnesses suggested that might have been some kind of electrical malfunction, but then the world learned it was so much more serious. Over in our wall, I want to show you where the investigators say this bomb went off. Manchester Arena, the biggest indoor stadium in all of Great Britain. It can hold 21,000, and it was mostly full. Investigators say the blast happened near the box office. Straight up there in the black writing, you see the red circle here. That's near the entrance of that arena. Remember, the concert had just ended, so people were making their way to the Victoria train station, which you see here. Some images to show you this afternoon in our slideshow. The first one from inside that arena this afternoon. The first one here shows people helping the victims, forensic workers combing through the evidence. That's these pictures here. And here, one woman placing flowers ahead of a vigil a short time ago. And the Queen paying respects. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip observing a moment of silence. And back at that vigil, a sign with so many messages for those who died, as well as for the community. A couple of the notes: to the people of Manchester, my heart goes out to you all, and love will always come through in the end. There have also been so many posts on social media, people looking for their loved ones, especially children. Ariana Grande tweeted last night, "Broken from the bottom of my heart, I'm so sorry. I don't have words." We'll have much more ahead, including a live report from Manchester and from Washington for the latest on what we're learning about that attack. Here at home, the big story again centers on the Russia investigation, and today, two enormous revelations. First, the former head of the CIA says he had a previously undisclosed conversation with the Russians, and in it, he testifies that he personally warned them not to interfere in the presidential election. He is the former director, John Brennan, and he made the comment today while testifying before the House Intelligence Committee. He said he told the Russians that meddling in our democracy would backfire on them and hurt their relations with the United States after the election. The second big news item today is this. Brennan testified he was worried that Russian intelligence operatives may have successfully recruited Trump campaign aides.
I encountered and am aware of information and intelligence that revealed contacts and interactions between Russian officials and U.S. persons involved in the Trump campaign that I was concerned about because of known Russian efforts to suborn such individuals, and it raised questions in my mind, again, whether or not the Russians were able to gain the cooperation of those individuals.
Now remember, Brennan had seen the intelligence. The former CIA director testified he does not know whether the Trump team colluded with the Russians, but he testified he was so concerned about their contacts that over the summer he pulled together a group of officials from the CIA, the FBI, and the National Intelligence Agency to focus exclusively on this one issue. Republicans on the committee grilled John Brennan about whether there is evidence of collusion. Brennan responded he couldn't answer the question. The CIA, he testified, focuses on intelligence, not on evidence. He also said people who go along a treasonous path often don't realize it until it's too late, and that Russia recruits sources wittingly and unwittingly. Republicans grilled the former CIA director about what he believes were the goals of Russia's election meddling.
It looks like the intelligence shows that Moscow was actually rooting for Donald Trump, or were they rooting against Hillary Clinton? And why?
I think my assessment is it was both. They, most of the time, believed that Secretary Clinton was going to win the election, and so their efforts to denigrate her were not just to try to diminish her chances of winning, but also to hurt her and for her eventual presidency. But also, it's my assessment that they clearly had a more favorable view toward Mr. Trump.
John Brennan said the Russians were trying to increase Donald Trump's prospects of winning the election, even though Brennan said the Russians felt like it was likely President Trump's prospects were not all that great. The former CIA director also said he believes that Russia's meddling in our democracy is far from over.
Do you think they would attempt to influence the 2018 midterm elections?
I have, unfortunately, grudging respect for Russian intelligence capabilities and their aggressiveness, their pervasiveness. I believe that they will try to exploit elections, but they will not wait only until elections.
John Brennan resigned from the CIA in January. President Trump, in a tweet, then accused him of being a leaker of fake news. Mike Pompeo replaced him. Lawmakers say they still want to know more about the agency's intelligence gathering before our election. After today's hearing, House Intelligence Committee members questioned Brennan yet again, but this time behind closed doors. Peter Ducey is live on Capitol Hill. Peter?
And Shep, a little while ago, we saw the former CIA director, John Brennan, exit and head up these stairs. So that closed classified session is over, but we do now have new word from the White House about this morning's proceedings. In a statement, they say this morning's hearings back up what we've been saying all along, that despite a year of investigation, there is still no evidence of any Russia-Trump campaign collusion, that the president never jeopardized intelligence sources or sharing, and that even Obama's CIA director believes the leaks of classified information are appalling and the culprits must be tracked down. Now, Brennan also revealed something interesting about the unmasking of American citizens, including possibly some Trump campaign officials that appear in intel reports. He testified that on his last day at the CIA, he didn't just unmask somebody on his way out the door to try and make it easier for whoever followed him to set up some kind of a case that the Trump campaign officials were involved with any kind of collusion with the Russians. However, he did reveal that more often than not, at the CIA, the way that this process works, when an official wants somebody's name unmasked, it happens.
Have you ever requested that a U.S. person's name be unmasked?
Yes, I have.
Have you also either approved or denied requests of others that a U.S. person's name be unmasked?
I don't recall in my tenure at CIA any decision on unmasking for someone else coming up to my level. It would have been, that decision would have been made at a lower level within the agency.
And there was some suggestion during that open hearing that unmasking would come up again at the closed hearing, but Brennan, the ranking member, Democrat Adam Schiff, and also the acting chairman of this probe, Mike Conaway, all exited, and none of them wanted to talk to us. Shep.
Lawmakers also asked John Brennan today about reports that President Trump shared classified information with the Russians in the Oval Office.
Right, and Brennan said he's not sure if those reports are true, but that if they are, he thinks President Trump may have violated two protocols, not laws, but protocols. One of them would be a protocol that discourages U.S. officials from sharing intel with visiting dignitaries as opposed to just going through intel channels, and then a separate protocol that encourages any U.S. officials that want to share intel with a foreign dignitary to go wherever that information came from and ask if it is okay to share. But two important points to close out about Brennan on this subject. First, he says that he shared a fair amount of intel with the Russians during his time as the director of the CIA, and he also said that he thinks these leaks that are damaging the Trump White House are appalling, and he does think that whoever is putting this information out that keeps dinging the Trump White House should be rounded up and punished. Shep.
Peter Ducey on Capitol Hill, thank you. The latest blockbuster report from the Washington Post is, if true, very serious. The paper reports President Trump asked the heads of the National Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency to say publicly that there was no collusion between the members of Team Trump and the Russians. Just minutes from now, we're expecting one of those men to testify on Capitol Hill regarding that very matter. We already heard from the other man, and we're waiting for a decision from the leaders of the Senate Intelligence Committee on what to do about Michael Flynn's refusal to cooperate with their subpoena. Details as we have them coming up from the Fox News deck on this Tuesday afternoon. Former CIA Director Brennan said he was worried that Russian intelligence operatives may have successfully recruited Trump campaign aides. And on the matter of possible collusion, that he was concerned about whether members of Team Trump were involved in Russian meddling. But he testified whether there was collusion or not is not a matter for the CIA. It's not their job. Let's turn to Rachel Bade now, a congressional reporter for Politico. It felt like when Trey Gowdy asked that question, he got an answer he was not expecting.
Absolutely. I think he was trying to talk about leaks there, but then Brennan went off to talk, obviously, about how this was turning into be a big problem in 2016. He said he was worried about contacts he was seeing over and over again between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And he used the word suborn over and over again, basically saying that the Russians have a habit of trying to talk to Americans and basically bribe them or get them to manipulate them into doing their will, whether or not they realize this is happening to them. He was worried that that was what was happening, so he took it upon himself to refer this to the FBI and to look into whether or not this collusion was happening. Now, he did not say whether or not collusion was happening. He left the agency, the CIA, in January. However, this is, again, not the answer Gowdy was expecting, and I think it sort of sent Republicans for a little shockwave at that moment.
Part of the base of his testimony seemed to be that he was concerned about the number and frequency of contacts.
That's absolutely right. He said over and over again that he was seeing intelligence that was signaling there was definitely contact going on. Another thing he brought up that Republicans, I think, really wanted to hear him talk about these leaks that we're seeing over and over again. And he did say these leaks that we're seeing are damaging to intelligence gathering methods. He's basically pointed to reports saying that the president gave classified information to Russian officials in the Oval Office, classified information that had come from Israel, allegedly. And he basically said the fact that this had gotten out was very discouraging to him, and he thought it could be very damaging because it would prohibit other countries from working with the United States on sensitive matters. He said those leakers need to be found and they need to be tracked down and stopped.
Then there's Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor, and this is just developing now. Remember, Michael Flynn had contacts with the Russians that he then lied about, and conversations with the Russians that he then lied about. He was eventually fired, according to the White House, for lying to the vice president. He refused to acknowledge a subpoena, give up records, and give testimony to a committee. But we've just heard from the Senate Intelligence Committee that it will likely take new actions today to force him to testify. What do we know about that, if anything?
The Senate Intelligence Chairman, Richard Burr, brought up yesterday that he could potentially hold Flynn in contempt of Congress. Basically, Flynn, by taking the Fifth Amendment, is refusing to give over these documents that Senator Burr wants about his contacts between the Russians and himself during the campaign. Burr said, I don't understand how you can assert your Fifth Amendment right if I'm just asking for documents. So there's a little bit of frustration, obviously, on the part of the committee. Now, Republicans disagree whether or not this was a good idea. Is it a good idea to hold him in contempt of Congress? It certainly is going to be a big circus on the Hill if that's going to be what they end up doing, and will definitely distract from Republicans' agenda on tax reform, health care, etc.
Rachel, bottom line, if the White House was hoping for some relief on this matter, for some cover on this matter, did they get it today in this hearing?
Oh, there's absolutely, definitely not. I would say that we keep seeing this over and over again. Today, obviously, the president unveiled his budget. They hope that that would be the thing driving the headlines. But again, all we're seeing are headlines about Flynn saying there could have been collusion. He was worried about contacts. We're going to be hearing about potentially Flynn being held in contempt of Congress. These are not the things the White House wants to see on page one. They want to be talking about their agenda. So this definitely hurts Republicans here in Washington.
Rachel Bade, reporter for Politico, live in a noisy statuary hall on Capitol Hill this afternoon. Rachel, thanks so much. Appreciate it. More on this in a moment. We'll talk with the journalist who says the White House leaks are a very big issue. But she also says President Trump has given himself, quote, a world of political, if not legal, hurt. That's next. President Trump reportedly asked two intelligence chiefs to help him push back against the FBI investigation into possible ties between his campaign and Russia. That's according to the reporting of the Washington Post. If reports President Trump made separate requests to the Director of the National Intelligence, Dan Coats, and the Director of the National Security Agency, Admiral Mike Rogers. According to the Post, the President asked each man to publicly deny that his campaign worked with the Russian government to influence the 2016 election. Coats and Rogers both refused, according to the reports of the Post. Certainly, neither made a public statement on the issue. As it turns out, hours after that Post report, Director Coats was testifying as previously scheduled on Capitol Hill today, and Senator John McCain asked him, and directly. As his policy, Coats would neither confirm nor deny.
Given the nature of my position and the information in which we share, it's not appropriate for me to comment publicly on any of that. So on this topic, as well as other topics, I don't feel it's appropriate to characterize discussions and conversations with the President.
Well, after the hearing, Senator Lindsey Graham said he doesn't think President Trump has anything to hide, but that he does need to understand how the process works.
I think he acts like a man who's very frustrated with the process. I see no evidence of collusion. I have no evidence that he's under investigation. But having said that, he's got to be more disciplined in terms of respecting the process. I don't see a man who's got something to hide. This man is very, very frustrated and needs to get a grip on it.
Well, let's bring in A.B. Stoddard, associate editor and columnist at RealClearPolitics.com. If this is true, what is this?
Well, I mean, Senator Graham describes it as someone who came from the outside, doesn't really understand these are checks and balances built into the structure of our government, and a part of his, an important part of his job, where he's not allowed to ask these questions and he's not allowed to make these demands of people about investigations. And if he has nothing to hide, he's still making a big mistake. It's not, it is crossing a line. It's going way over a line to ask people to come out and publicly disavow or, you know, deny the existence of certain parts of an investigation, whether it's about collusion or not about collusion. And so the president has shown, whether there's collusion or not, whether there's any grounds for obstruction, and I'm not a lawyer and I'm not going to get into that, a willingness to step over these lines. And in the end, because these stories have been leaked to the press about Comey's, you know, he requested loyalty from Comey. He had made these requests of Rogers and Coates. It leads to, obviously, a storyline that ends with the firing of Comey, which the president said was a result of the Russia investigation. The appearance and a pattern of him getting frustrated, as Senator Graham says, with the investigation and doing something to try to either slow it down or change the public perception of it, none of which is allowed.
But didn't he bring this all on himself?
That's the problem, Shep, is that all of these things are self-inflicted. So he can fire Comey. He could have done it at any time.
For any
Comey
reason.
serves at the will of the president. Right, with good reason. Comey breached protocol and actually inserted himself into a political plot of the election last year. And so there's so many things that President Trump can do. It's the way that he does it. He blames the Rosenstein memo that came from the Deputy Attorney General, and then he sends Vice President Mike Pence to go out and say 7 times on Capitol Hill it was because of the recommendations, the strong recommendations, in a memo written by Rod Rosenstein, who then gets thrown under the bus the next day by the president in an interview with NBC News saying, no, it was my decision all along. So this is the kind of thing, that's why he's just bringing himself so much political pain. If it's not legal and ethical, it is so political peril that he doesn't need, when Republicans in Congress are increasingly afraid to defend him, not knowing what he'll turn around and say 36 hours later.
But the Lindsey Graham defense was, in essence, he just doesn't know better, doesn't understand the system. But when he told somebody to go say something that we later learned that wasn't true, does that defense also apply? Does it apply today when he arrived in Tel Aviv and said that he had just left Saudi Arabia, just left the Middle East?
The problem is the stakes are so high, Shepard, at this point. Someone has to take him aside and say, people now know because of these leaks. You asked Comey for loyalty. You asked Rogers and Coates to come out and to give a statement denying there was any kind of investigation into collusion. Then you fired Comey. You gave the different stories about why you've fired Comey. You've got to learn the rules of this process. You may not like it, but you have to abide by the rules of the process. I don't know if he's getting that counsel from people that he trusts. If he is, he's not listening to them, and it's making it much harder on people around him to defend him. It's all self-inflicted. And it doesn't have to be.
Maybe Stoddard, thank you. President Trump is reportedly close to picking a group of lawyers from outside the federal government to help him with these Russia investigations. A team of lawyers. That's according to the Washington Post. White House officials are not confirming the report, but they're not denying it either. Trace Gallagher is here with us. Trace?
Well, Shep, the Washington Post says the president and his advisors are focusing on kind of a number of prominent attorneys from various firms who would really work together as a team. And some of the names being mentioned include former U.S. Solicitor General Ted Olson, who rose to prominence, of course, back in 2000 when he argued Gore v. Bush before the Supreme Court, delivering the presidency to George W. Bush. Olson also helped overturn the 2000 California ballot measure outlawing same-sex marriage. Olson's wife, Barbara, died on the plane that hit the Pentagon on 9/11. Then there's Robert Giffra, Jr., who is currently the coordinating counsel for Volkswagen, which recently admitted cheating on emission tests here in the U.S. A third big name being bandied about includes Reed Weingarten, who some believe is pretty much an unlikely choice because he has represented many, many Democratic clients, and he's also very close friends with the former Attorney General under the Obama administration, Eric Holder. Shep.
And there may be a possible conflict of interest with one of the leading candidates. Is that right?
Yeah, correct, because Mark Kasowitz is said to be another contender, and Kasowitz right now is a partner in a very powerful law firm here in, or not where you are in New York. He's known Mr. Trump for decades and has represented him in a number of cases. But the senior counsel at Kasowitz law firm is former Senator Joseph Lieberman, who is also President Trump's leading candidate to head up the FBI. So if you have Lieberman heading the organization investigating the possibility of Russian collusion, and you have Kasowitz giving President Trump legal advice on that same investigation, having them in the very same law firm could be a conflict. And by the way, we should note, this outside legal team is separate from the White House counsel's office. Shep.
Trace Gallagher, thank you, sir. So we're waiting for the NSA director right now, Michael Rogers, to testify on Capitol Hill. We believe it'll happen at any minute. We'll let you know if he responds to the Washington Post report that President Trump requested that he speak out about the Russia investigation and deny collusion. He didn't do so, by the way. Plus, a live report from Manchester, England, the scene of last night's horrific suicide bombing, what we now know about the suspected bomber and about his victims. Continuing coverage now of the suicide attack at the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, England. 22 dead, nearly 60 injured. British officials are now identifying the suspected bomber, and police there say they've arrested one other person. The British Prime Minister calling the incident a callous terrorist attack. It would be the deadliest terror attack on British soil since 2005, when more than 50 people died in coordinated bombings on London's transit system. Our senior correspondent Rick Leventhal live in Manchester for us this evening. Rick?
Shepard, a very different scene here tonight than roughly 22 hours ago when this terror attack took place. The road's still closed, the police are still on scene, but none of the screams and none of the sirens. We're about 210 miles north of London, Manchester, a city of about 500,000, easily accessible by train, and this is one of the main rail hubs here in Manchester, Victoria Station, and it is connected directly to the Manchester Arena, which is the largest indoor concert venue in the UK. It was packed last night with some 21,000 people headed for the exits after that Ariana Grande concert ended, and the attack took place in a public area between the train station and the concert venue. Chaos in the crowd of mostly teens and preteens and young adults as they heard the explosion. There were screams and there was panic and a stampede for the exits. At least 22 killed, as you mentioned, including an 8-year-old girl named Safi Rose Roussos and an 18-year-old student, Georgina Bethany Callender, and dozens more injured by shrapnel, nuts and bolts packed in the IED to maximize the carnage, and now authorities facing the grim task of identifying the rest of the dead.
It is an absolutely barbaric attack that has taken place. To cut off young lives in this way, I mean, it is absolutely devastating, and our thoughts and prayers must be with their families and friends at this horrendous tragedy that has taken place.
Yeah, a really tough time, Shepard, as you mentioned, the worst attack here in almost 12 years.
Huge crowds at a vigil today, too, I understand, Rick.
Yeah, and we talked to a guy who's lived here in Manchester for about 10 years. He says normally there's a lot of energy in this city, that the town is always buzzing, but not today. Very somber, very quiet, and thousands of people turned out at Albert Square, just a short distance from us here, to remember the lives lost, to honor the people who were tragically wounded and killed in this terror attack. A huge crowd there holding signs and candles and holding silent prayers, observing moments of silence. Our friend who we spoke with said he didn't see a lot of tears, but certainly this town is in tatters right now, trying to make sense out of what was clearly a senseless act, Shepard.
Rick Leventhal live on scene tonight. Rick, thank you. The Director of National Intelligence says United States officials are working with their British counterparts to help with the investigation into that bombing. Dan Coates testified in the Senate Armed Services Committee today in a previously scheduled hearing, as I mentioned. It comes as British police say they have carried out multiple raids in connection with this attack. Now the chief constable in the city of Manchester, the second largest in all of England, says they're trying to figure out whether the suspected bomber was acting alone or as part of a larger network. Catherine Harridge live in Washington. Catherine?
Shep, investigators are building a picture of the suspect, 22-year-old Salman Abedi, what his movements were in recent weeks leading up to the attack, his travel, and who he communicated with. The bomber's electronics will likely play a significant role in this case, with the U.S. counterterrorism investigator telling Fox News a preliminary review of social media accounts linked to that name came up dry. A congressional source told Fox that the forensic review of the improvised explosive device, what's left at least, is underway, and the shrapnel used to deadly effect is considered a vital clue because investigators can typically trace the nuts and bolts to a manufacturer, even a point of sale, and then bring in security camera video so they can identify who bought the bomb parts. The British intelligence agencies are in the lead, providing regular updates to the FBI and the CIA. A law enforcement source said the U.S. intelligence agencies are running the suspect's name through their databases of known terror suspects, and that's a pretty standard practice, Shep.
What else did the Director of National Intelligence say on this matter in Capitol Hill, Catherine?
Well, the DNI, who oversees the 17 intelligence agencies, told the Senate panel that his analysts are working to verify the ISIS claim of responsibility, adding,
"This threat is real. It is not going away and needs significant attention to do everything we can to protect our people from these kinds of attacks."
A counterterrorism investigator says there may be some significance to the ISIS claim because it does not identify the bomber's name. And the English translation talks about multiple devices placed at the concert hall, suggesting a suicide attack may not have been the ultimate intention. But based on this claim of responsibility, lawmakers do say the key issue again is whether a terror group was behind it, whether this guy was, there's kind of a continuum. They talk about people who are inspired, people who are enabled, and then the most serious is those who are directed. But at the end of the day, if they're successful, it really doesn't matter, does it, where they are in that continuum?
Truly doesn't.
Yeah.
Catherine, thanks.
You're welcome.
President Trump condemning the attack in a way we haven't seen from past presidents.
"I will call them from now on losers, because that's what they are. They're losers."
Ahead, more from President Trump's response to the attack as he continues his first diplomatic trip abroad.